The boy sat quietly on the edge of the old wooden bench, his small fingers hovering over the piano keys as he tried to focus on the music he loved so much. The world around him was a blur of shapes and shadows, and he could not see the faces of the people who had gathered to watch him play. His eyes, always closed to the outside world, felt the weight of every stare and whisper, every snicker that seemed louder than the notes he tried to produce. Even though he was blind, he could sense the unkindness that surrounded him. He had grown used to it, but it never felt easy. Every day was a challenge. Some days it felt like the air itself was heavier, pressing down on him as he walked to the piano. He had learned the streets, the sidewalks, and the alleys with his other senses. He could feel the cracks in the pavement under his shoes, hear the soft scuff of footsteps behind him, and smell the faint scent of flowers, food, or smoke that drifted through the busy town. Yet nothing prepared him for the cruelty of the people who came to watch him play. He had a love for music that ran deep, a joy that the darkness of his eyes could not hide. Every note he pressed was like a whisper of his soul, a way to reach out and touch a world that he could not see. But music, which was supposed to be his comfort, had also become the reason for his suffering. People came not to listen, but to mock, to laugh at his mistakes, to find joy in his discomfort. They pointed, they whispered, and sometimes they even shouted insults, thinking that a blind boy could not hear or feel their cruelty. But he did. Every word, every laugh, every look that carried scorn landed on him like stones. He had been forced into this routine by circumstances beyond his control. His family, struggling to survive, had little time to care for his dreams. Some adults saw his blindness as an opportunity to make him perform for their entertainment or profit. He had no choice but to comply, to play the piano under the watchful and often cruel eyes of strangers. His hands had learned the keys and his ears had learned the melodies, but his heart still trembled with every new audience. The first time he had been made to play in public, he remembered the panic that had rushed through him. His fingers had trembled and the notes had sounded uneven, offbeat. Laughter had erupted, not the laughter of joy, but of mockery. He had wanted to cry, to run, to hide from the world, but he had no safe place. Over time, he learned to sit still, to play, to try and lose himself in the music while the jeers continued. Music became both his shield and his burden. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when a kind smile appeared, when someone clapped at the right moment, when the laughter paused for just a second. Those moments gave him hope, tiny sparks of light that he clung to in the darkness. He imagined what it would be like if people really listened, if they heard not the mistakes but the music itself. That dream carried him through the hardest days. The town where he played was a mixture of noise and life, with people moving quickly, rarely stopping to notice the small things. But for the boy, every sound mattered. The wind whistling through cracks in the walls, the distant barking of dogs, the soft hum of conversation, all became part of the rhythm of his day. Even the mocking voices became familiar, a cruel sort of accompaniment to his playing. Sometimes he would imagine them as part of a song, strange as it sounded, and for a moment the laughter became music itself. Despite the hardship, he never lost his determination. Every day he came back to the piano, even when his hands ached, even when his spirit felt broken. Music was the only place where he felt free, where the darkness around him could not touch the brightness within. He practiced not because anyone demanded it, but because he had a love for the notes, the rhythm, the harmony that no one could take away. Some children tried to be friends, but most kept their distance, unsure how to interact with someone who could not see. He often felt lonely, the kind of loneliness that sits deep in the chest, heavy and silent. Even in a crowd, he felt invisible, like he was walking through the world without being truly seen. Yet he never let this stop him from playing. His music was his voice, his way of saying, "I am here, I matter." The adults around him often misunderstood his silence. They saw his quietness as fear, his patience as weakness, and his careful movements as clumsiness. They did not see the strength it took to face a world that was often cruel, nor did they understand the courage behind every note he played. They did not hear the music in his heart, only the mistakes in his hands. Each day brought new challenges. Sometimes the weather was harsh with cold winds or sudden rain, making it difficult to play. Other times the audience was particularly harsh, shouting and throwing small objects trying to make him falter. But still he came back. He had learned to focus, to let the music guide him, to lose himself in the melody and forget the world for a little while. His mind often wandered as he played. He imagined the colors he could never see, the faces he longed to meet, the places he wanted to visit. In his imagination, the music painted pictures, told stories, and carried him far from the streets where he was mocked. Sometimes he imagined a world where people listened with their hearts, not their eyes, where kindness was louder than laughter, and compassion more powerful than cruelty. Despite the harshness, he never gave up hope. Hope was a small, quiet flame inside him, never extinguished by the cold winds of mockery. He dreamed of a day when someone would come along and see him, really see him, not for his blindness, not for the mistakes he made, but for the music he created and the person he was. His parents, though struggling, had always told him that he was special, that his blindness did not define him. They could not always protect him, could not shield him from the ridicule of strangers, but their words stayed with him. He repeated them to himself whenever the world felt too heavy, and they gave him strength to continue. The piano itself was old and worn, with some keys sticking and others sounding dull. Yet to the boy it was perfect. It was more than an instrument. It was a companion, a friend that never judged, never mocked, never left him alone. Every note was a conversation, every chord a story, and he poured his heart into each melody, hoping somehow that someone, somewhere would hear the truth behind the music. There were nights when he dreamed of playing on stages far away, where the audience listened quietly, where applause followed music, not mockery. In his dreams, he saw himself playing freely, his fingers dancing over the keys, his heart light and his spirit soaring. Those dreams kept him alive, gave him courage, and reminded him that one day, the world might understand the beauty he carried inside. Even on the worst days, when laughter and cruelty seemed unbearable, he would return to the piano, sit quietly and begin to play, slowly at first, then with more confidence, letting the music fill the air, letting it speak what he could not say with words. People passed by, some stopped, some ignored, but he kept playing, driven by a love so strong that no mockery could destroy it. And so, the boy continued his daily struggle, facing a world that was often unkind, yet never giving up his music. Each note was a small victory, a declaration of his existence, a promise to himself that he would keep going no matter what. The streets might be cruel, the audience mocking and the world harsh, but as long as he could play, he had a reason to hope, a reason to believe that one day, his music would be heard for what it truly was. Beautiful, heartfelt and true. The morning air was cool and quiet, carrying with it the faint scent of bread from a nearby bakery and the distant hum of life awakening in the town. The boy made his way through the narrow streets, his white cane tapping softly against the pavement, marking his path. His mind was already filled with the melodies he would play that day, the songs that had become a part of him, more real than the people around him. Each step he took was measured, careful yet purposeful. He had learned to navigate the world with senses sharper than most could imagine. The piano waited for him at the small square, its wood weathered and faded from years of sun and rain. It had been abandoned by the owners long ago, left for the children and wanderers who might pass by. But for him, it was more than a piece of furniture. It was a portal to another world. The moment his fingers touched the keys, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. The first note was never perfect, sometimes off, sometimes trembling, but it was always honest. As he played, people began to gather. Not all were kind, not all were curious in the right way. Some whispered to one another, pointing, laughing quietly, waiting for him to make a mistake. He had grown used to it, yet each time it stung like a small thorn. The boy knew their intention, the cruelty hidden behind smiles and casual glances. Yet he did not stop. He could not stop. Music was his voice, his shield, and his escape. The sounds around him were a mixture of the ordinary and the unusual. A dog barked somewhere nearby. The wind rustled through the leaves of a tall tree, and the distant clatter of carts on cobblestones added to the symphony of his day. But even amid the normalcy, the harshness of human mockery pierced through. A man laughed loudly at a wrong note. A group of children mimicked his movements, pretending to be blind themselves. The boy felt the sting, but he let it roll off him, focusing on the melody instead. He had learned to turn pain into rhythm, sadness into harmony. He remembered the first time he had played here, how every laugh and comment had felt like a hammer against his chest. He had cried quietly behind the piano, wishing for a friend, someone who could see the music he was making and understand it without words. That wish had lingered in his heart ever since, a quiet hope that perhaps someday someone would come. The routine was relentless. Each day he played the same pieces, variations on what he had learned in the small hours of quiet mornings when no one was watching. Yet he infused each note with something new, something personal. He imagined stories in the melodies, journeys across distant lands, conversations with people he had never met, and emotions he could not express in ordinary speech. Music had become his language, richer than any words he could speak, deeper than any touch he could feel. People often wondered how someone so young and so blind could play with such emotion, yet few stopped to really listen. The audience was more interested in the spectacle, the novelty of a blind boy at a piano, than in the music itself. They clapped when he finished, sometimes out of genuine appreciation, often out of relief that the performance was over. He knew the difference. He could sense when someone truly listened, felt the vibrations of genuine attention, the warmth of an open heart. Those rare moments were treasures. There were days when he played and no one came at all. The square was empty except for the pigeons that fluttered and cooed, the wind that moved through the leaves, and the distant sound of life continuing without notice of him. Those days were lonely, yet they allowed him freedom. He could lose himself in the music completely, exploring melodies that no one had heard before, creating worlds with sound alone. On such days he felt the true power of music, the way it could lift him above the weight of the world. But even in solitude, the boy could not escape the realities of his life. He felt hunger sometimes, cold sometimes, and the ache of longing for human connection. He wondered about the people who walked past, where they were going, what they were thinking, and if they ever noticed the small miracles in their midst. He imagined their lives just as they imagined his, never realizing the richness of his inner world. One day, a group of teenagers arrived, restless and loud. They circled the piano, leaning on walls, laughing and throwing teasing comments.
"Can he even see what he's doing?"
One whispered loudly. Another added, "I bet he hits more wrong notes than right ones." The boy felt his chest tighten but did not stop. His fingers moved over the keys, slower now, deliberate, each note a statement of quiet resistance. He did not play for them, nor for anyone else who doubted him. He played for himself, for the music that lived inside him, for the hope that one day someone would understand. His mind often wandered to thoughts of family. They were poor but loving, doing what they could to care for him. His parents worried about him constantly, wondering if the world was too harsh, too cruel for a blind child who had such dreams. Yet they never tried to stop him from playing. They saw that music was his lifeline, his way of communicating with a world that sometimes refused to see him. Even in their worry, they had learned to trust him, to let him grow through his passion, and that trust gave him courage. He also thought of the teachers he had known, those who had believed in him, those rare few who had encouraged him to practice and to feel the music deeply. Their voices echoed in his mind like gentle reminders that he was capable, that blindness did not mean weakness, that mistakes were part of learning, not shame. He clung to those lessons, weaving them into every performance, letting them guide his hands when fear threatened to paralyze him. Sometimes, when the laughter and mockery became too much, he would close his eyes even tighter, shutting out the world entirely. He would imagine a place where kindness was abundant, where people listened with their hearts, where mistakes were met with understanding, not ridicule. In that place he was free. The piano became an instrument of joy, of exploration, of pure expression. He traveled there in his mind with every chord, every scale, every song. Yet reality always returned. The boy would hear the snickers, the whispers, the pointed fingers. Sometimes strangers would drop coins not out of respect, but as if giving alms to a spectacle. He felt the weight of their pity, heavier than mockery itself. He wanted respect, not pity, acknowledgement, not charity. But he took the coins anyway, knowing that they were necessary for his survival, for the meals he often went without, for the small comforts his family could not always provide. Despite all of this, he never lost his love for music. Each day he returned to the piano, knowing that the world might not be kind, but he could still create something beautiful. His hands had learned to remember the keys, to anticipate the notes, to play even when the mind was clouded with sadness. Music became a mirror of his soul, reflecting his courage, his resilience, and the depth of his feelings. In quiet moments, He imagined what it would be like if someone truly saw him. Not just the blindness, not just the small body at the piano, but the spirit inside. He longed for a friend, a companion, someone who would sit beside him, who would understand the music without judgment, who would share the silence and the joy alike. That longing stayed with him, a soft ache that sometimes brought tears, sometimes brought hope. On a particular afternoon, the boy noticed a small figure approaching. The child seemed wary, moving slowly, eyes wide, carrying nothing but a small bag. The boy did not see the figure, but he sensed the presence, the hesitant energy that approached the piano. He continued to play, letting the music flow naturally, curious if this new presence would linger or move away like so many others. The small figure paused, listening. The boy could feel it, could feel the attention, the focus. Something in the energy of this stranger was different from the usual mocking crowd. There was no laughter, no whispers, no judgment, only listening. And in that moment, a small seed of hope planted itself in the boy's heart, a quiet possibility that perhaps the world could be kind, that perhaps connection was possible, and that music could be the bridge between two lonely souls. The small figure moved closer, the soft shuffle of worn shoes on the pavement barely audible over the notes of the piano. The boy did not stop playing. He could sense the attention, the quiet curiosity, and it felt different from the usual crowd. There was no mockery in the way the figure approached, no snickers or whispered comments, just presence, a careful, almost hesitant presence that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of his music. His fingers danced over the keys, weaving melodies that carried both hope and sorrow, as if they were trying to reach out across the distance to touch the stranger's heart. The figure, a young girl no older than the boy himself, finally came to a halt at the edge of the small square. Her clothes were worn and tattered, evidence of a life lived mostly in the streets. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks smudged with dirt, and her eyes wide with cautious curiosity. She had seen the boy before, perhaps from a distance, and had been drawn here by the music she did not fully understand. But that stirred something deep inside her. She did not speak. She only listened, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm of the notes. The boy felt her presence as a gentle warmth, a shift in the usual energy of the square. He had grown accustomed to the cold, mocking stares of strangers, but this was different. This attention was quiet, patient, and unjudging. It made him play with more freedom, more depth. Each note seemed to stretch further, carrying more feeling, more story, more of himself than ever before. The music became a conversation between them, unspoken but deeply understood. The girl's fingers twitched at her sides as if she wanted to reach out, to touch the piano, to join in some way, but she hesitated. Life on the streets had taught her caution, had taught her that the world was often harsh and kindness was rare. Yet the music called to her, pulling her closer, making her forget the usual wariness. She took a small step forward, then another, until she was standing near the piano, listening as if her entire being depended on every note. For the boy, it was strange at first. He had never felt such attention without ridicule. He could not see her, but he felt it in the way the air around him seemed different, lighter, warmer. It was as if the music itself had invited her, and she had come to respond. He hesitated for a moment, then let the melody flow even more freely, not trying to impress anyone, not trying to perform, just playing for the pure connection he sensed. The girl's eyes glimmered with understanding. She began to hum softly, almost imperceptibly at first, a gentle sound that blended with the piano. The boy felt it immediately, felt the vibration of her voice as a partner in the music. He adjusted, letting his fingers follow the subtle rhythm she created, harmonizing without words, without needing instructions. For the first time, the square was not filled with mockery, but with a quiet partnership, a meeting of two souls through music. Passers-by began to notice the change. The usual laughter was absent, replaced by curiosity and wonder. People slowed down, stopped to watch. Some even held their breath, as if afraid to disturb the delicate connection unfolding before them. The boy did not see any of this, yet he felt it. The shift in energy around him, the way the air seemed to hum with approval. He focused on the girl's voice, matching the flow of her humming with chords and notes that spoke of both sadness and joy, fear and hope. The girl, encouraged by his response, grew bolder. She sang softly now, clear and tentative but filled with emotion. Her voice was raw and untrained, yet it carried a depth of feeling that complemented the piano perfectly. The boy responded instinctively, letting the music lead him, letting the notes become a dialogue between them. They did not need words. The melodies conveyed everything: the loneliness, the pain, the small joys, and the fragile hope they both carried. Time seemed to slow around them. The sun moved across the sky, shadows stretching longer on the cobblestones, yet neither noticed. The piano and the two young musicians became the center of a small world where only the music mattered. Each note and each hum was a step closer to understanding, a step closer to friendship, a step closer to the warmth of human connection they had both been missing. As they played, the girl felt something shift inside her. Music had always been a comfort, a secret escape from the harshness of life on the streets. But now it was also a bridge to someone else, a real human connection that made her heart beat differently. She dared a smile, small and fleeting, feeling the boy's presence not as a stranger but as someone who might understand her without explanation. The boy, though he could not see it, felt the energy of her smile, sensed the lightness in her voice, and felt a spark of joy that he had not known for a long time. Other people began to gather, drawn by the unusual duet. They watched quietly, some with curiosity, others with amazement. A few reached for their phones, capturing the scene, but most simply stopped, listening. The boy, focused entirely on the music, felt no fear of judgment. He had found a partner, and that was enough. Together, they created a harmony that was new, unexpected, and beautiful, rising above the noise of the streets, the coldness of indifference, and the harshness of mockery. The girl, feeling a growing sense of courage, started to clap softly in rhythm with the music. It was a small gesture, yet it added a new layer to their performance. The boy adjusted, incorporating the claps into his playing, creating a rhythm that was lively, playful, and filled with energy. Their music became a dance, a conversation, a celebration of presence and connection. The people around them could not help but notice the transformation from what had been a lonely performance to a collaborative and joyful moment. The boy's heart swelled with a mixture of surprise and relief. He had never experienced anything like this. Someone had joined him, not to mock, not to pity, but to share in the music, to become part of it. He felt an unfamiliar sense of trust, a fragile but powerful belief that perhaps not all people were cruel. Perhaps kindness existed even in the most unlikely places, even in the life of a homeless girl who had wandered into his world. They continued to play together for what seemed like hours. The notes and hums intertwined, creating melodies that seemed to tell the story of both their lives, the hardships, the loneliness, the dreams, and the longing for understanding. People around them listened in silence, moved by the unexpected beauty of two young souls connecting through music. Some even whispered to one another about the magic of the moment, amazed that such harmony could emerge from such unlikely beginnings. As the day wore on, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the square. The boy and the girl finally paused, letting the last note linger in the air. For a moment there was only silence, filled with the weight of what had just happened. Neither spoke immediately. They simply felt the presence of the other, the new bond that had formed, fragile but real. In that silence, the boy realized that he had found a friend, someone who would not mock him, someone who could hear the music inside him without judgment. The girl looked at the piano, then at the boy, and finally smiled again. This time her smile was broader, more confident, a small declaration that she belonged here in this moment and perhaps even in his life. The boy felt it too, the warmth of shared understanding, the excitement of a new chapter beginning. For the first time, the piano was no longer a stage for ridicule, but a place of friendship, of collaboration, and of hope. They stayed together as the light faded, the square emptying slowly, but their hearts were full. The boy felt a sense of possibility he had not known before. Music had brought them together, yes, but it was the connection, the empathy, and the understanding that made the moment unforgettable. They had found each other, two lost souls who had been searching for someone to see them, to hear them, to understand them. That day marked a turning point. The boy no longer felt entirely alone when he played. The girl had shown him that someone could truly listen, that friendship could blossom in the most unexpected places, and the girl herself discovered that the world, despite its harshness, had moments of beauty and kindness that she had not dared to hope for. Together they had created something magical, a bond formed not with words but with the language of the heart, expressed through the universal power of music. The next day dawned with a gentle golden light spilling across the town. The boy made his way to the piano, feeling a sense of anticipation that he had never felt before. Yesterday had been unlike any other day, a day when he had met someone who truly listened, someone who had joined him in music rather than mocking him. That memory kept him warm during the long walk, each tap of his cane echoing like a rhythm in his chest. He could feel that something had changed, though he did not know exactly what it meant. There was a sense of possibility in the air, a fragile hope that this connection might grow. When he arrived at the square, he saw her immediately, sitting nearby, her worn bag at her feet. She looked up as he approached, her eyes lighting up with recognition. The boy felt a small smile lift his face, though he knew she could not see it. They exchanged no words at first. Instead, he moved to the piano and let his fingers hover above the keys. She waited patiently, as if she understood that the music would speak before words ever could. He began to play, softly at first, testing the melody that had become his comfort. The notes were gentle, winding through the morning air, carrying a quiet emotion that seemed to resonate in every corner of the square. The girl joined in almost immediately, humming softly, her voice blending with the piano in a way that felt natural and right. Their music created a small world around them, a space where only they existed, where the past hardships could not intrude. Passers-by slowed down, captivated by the unexpected harmony that filled the streets. The boy felt something new within him, a sense of courage and joy that he had never experienced while playing alone. With the girl's voice alongside his piano, he dared to explore more complex melodies, letting his fingers wander across the keys with confidence. Each note seemed to soar higher than before, carrying with it the story of their shared experience, the pain, the loneliness, and now the fragile beauty of friendship. It was as if the music itself was growing stronger, fueled by the connection between two people who had been searching for understanding. As they played, the boy felt his heart lighten. He had spent so many days performing under the weight of ridicule that he had forgotten what it felt like to create music simply for the joy of it. Now, with the girl beside him, he remembered. Every chord, every melody became a conversation, an exchange of feelings that words could never capture. The square, once a place of discomfort, had transformed into a sanctuary, a space where music could heal, where hearts could connect without fear or judgment. The girl's presence inspired him in ways he could not fully explain. She sang with a raw honesty, her voice trembling at times yet filled with a depth of emotion that moved the boy deeply. He matched her energy with the piano, letting the rhythm follow her lead, adjusting the tempo and dynamics as if they were two halves of the same heartbeat. For the first time, he felt that his music was not just an escape, but a bridge to another soul, a way to communicate that transcended language. Sight and circumstance, people began to gather, drawn by the harmony between the piano and the voice. They did not laugh, nor did they mock. Instead, they listened with quiet attention, some stopping to admire the unlikely partnership. A few children approached cautiously, curious about the duo, and then smiled as the girl's hum mingled with the piano. Even the adults seemed moved, sensing the authenticity of the performance, the honesty that radiated from the boy and the girl. The square had become a place where kindness and appreciation replaced cruelty, if only for a moment. The boy felt a growing confidence. Each day, he had faced challenges that tested his resolve, yet now he realized that he could overcome more than he had ever imagined. With the girl beside him, the music was no longer a solitary act of endurance. It had become a shared experience, a journey that they could take together. He began to experiment with new melodies, improvising freely, letting the emotions guide his fingers rather than fear or expectation. The girl responded instantly to his improvisation, her hum shifting in pitch and rhythm to match his changes. It was as if they had been playing together for years, not just one day. Their music flowed effortlessly, creating moments of beauty that neither could have achieved alone. They laughed softly when a note went awry, not out of embarrassment, but as a shared joy in the imperfection, the human element that made the music real and alive. With each passing day, their friendship deepened. The girl brought small stories from her life on the streets, not with words, but through the subtle changes in her singing, the emotions she conveyed through tone and rhythm. The boy responded with melodies that told his own story, his struggles, his hopes, and the quiet resilience that had carried him through the years. Together, they built a silent language, a vocabulary of music that allowed them to express what had been hidden for so long. Their bond began to influence the people around them. Strangers who had once passed without a glance now lingered, offering coins not out of pity but in genuine admiration. Shopkeepers peeked out of windows to listen, their faces softening as they took in the purity of the performance. Even the local children began to approach more often, curious and eager to witness the magic of the boy and the girl playing together. The atmosphere of the square was changing, shaped by the simple act of two young souls sharing their music. The boy noticed that he no longer felt the crushing weight of fear when people approached. The girl's presence gave him courage, and her unwavering attention reminded him that he was not alone. They had created a small world where kindness and understanding were possible, where music could be both a shield and a bridge. He felt a sense of responsibility, a desire to nurture this connection, to explore its possibilities, and to protect the fragile trust that had been established. As the days passed, they began to develop a routine. The boy would arrive first, setting up at the piano, allowing the morning light to warm the keys. The girl would find her spot nearby, sometimes humming softly as he played, sometimes adding rhythm or gentle claps to enhance the melody. Their improvisations became more sophisticated, blending different styles and emotions, creating a unique sound that captured the attention of everyone who passed. They were no longer just a blind boy and a homeless girl. They were a team, a pair who had discovered the transformative power of collaboration and trust. One afternoon, as they played a particularly moving piece, a small crowd gathered, including some who had been skeptical at first. They watched in awe as the boy and girl communicated seamlessly through their music, their emotions evident in every note and hum. Some whispered among themselves about the beauty of what they were witnessing. Others were silent, simply absorbing the moment. The boy felt a surge of pride and gratitude, not for recognition, but for the realization that they were capable of touching hearts through their shared art. The girl, too, felt a sense of accomplishment and belonging that she had never known. Life on the streets had taught her to be wary, to trust few people and to rely only on herself. Yet here, with the boy, she discovered that connection was possible, that collaboration could bring joy, that music could speak where words often failed. Her voice grew stronger, more confident, as she realized that they were creating something special, something that transcended their hardships and brought light to a world that often felt dark. Their performances began to inspire others. Local musicians, hearing of the duo, started to bring small instruments, joining in occasionally, creating a larger, more vibrant sound. Children began to gather, learning from their improvisation and experimenting with their own contributions. The square became a place of community, where people came not to mock or judge but to participate, to experience the joy of music together. The boy and the girl had unknowingly sparked a movement, a small revolution of empathy and creativity, simply by being themselves and sharing their talents. Through it all, the boy never lost sight of the journey that had brought him here. The hardships he had endured, the loneliness he had felt, and the cruelty he had faced were still part of his story, but they no longer defined him. The music he played, the partnership he had formed with the girl, and the community they were building gave him strength and purpose. He realized that he had found not only a friend but also a sense of belonging, a place where his voice mattered, where his music could heal and inspire. The girl, too, embraced the change in her life. She had discovered that her presence mattered, that her voice could contribute to something beautiful, that she could belong somewhere. The piano, once a symbol of isolation for the boy, had become a symbol of connection and hope. Together they had transformed not only their own lives but also the lives of those who took the time to listen, to engage, and to appreciate the beauty that two young, vulnerable souls could create. As the sun set each day, painting the square in warm hues of orange and gold, the boy and the girl would finish their performances, sharing a quiet moment of satisfaction and reflection. They had found each other, discovered the power of collaboration, and created a bond that neither could have anticipated. Music had brought them together, but it was the trust, empathy, and understanding they nurtured that made their connection real and lasting. In the quiet aftermath of each performance, they knew that they had discovered something rare and precious, a friendship forged in notes, rhythm, and the courage to be seen and heard. The boy awoke early that morning, a gentle sense of excitement coursing through him. Today felt different, like something significant was about to happen. He made his way to the piano with careful steps, his cane tapping rhythmically on the pavement. As he approached the square, he heard a familiar hum. It was the girl, waiting, her voice blending with the soft morning air in a melody that felt like a greeting, a promise, and an embrace all at once. He smiled, though she could not see it, and began to play without hesitation, letting the notes flow freely and confidently. The girl joined him immediately, her voice merging seamlessly with the piano. Together they created a sound that was richer, fuller, and more alive than ever before. Each note told a story, each chord carried emotion, and together they conveyed their shared experiences, the hardships they had faced, the loneliness they had endured, and the joy they had discovered in each other's presence. The square began to fill slowly with people who had heard of the duo, drawn by the magic that seemed to pour from their music. Strangers watched in awe as the boy and the girl played together, their performance no longer just a street act, but a phenomenon of connection and hope. People whispered to one another, marveling at the harmony they created, the emotions that spilled into every corner of the square. Coins were placed in an open case not out of pity but admiration, and the performers did not take notice, focused entirely on the music and the shared language they had built. The boy's fingers moved with ease, more confident than ever, responding intuitively to the girl's humming and soft claps. They had developed a rhythm that felt almost like breathing together, each knowing instinctively how the other would shift, pause, or emphasize a note. The music became a living entity, breathing life into the square, touching everyone who stopped to listen. It was no longer about survival or enduring ridicule. It was about creation, connection, and expression. As they played, the boy and the girl began to experiment with new melodies, blending the familiar with the unknown. Their music told stories of hope and resilience, painting pictures of distant lands, childhood dreams, and the simple beauty of being alive. People were captivated, drawn into a world where kindness and understanding prevailed, a stark contrast to the indifference and mockery they had once known. The square transformed into a sanctuary, where emotions flowed freely, and hearts opened to the possibility of empathy and joy. A few local musicians, inspired by their performances, began to join occasionally, adding small instruments and harmonies that enriched the sound. Children gathered, learning from the improvisation and adding their own voices to the mix. The atmosphere was one of community, collaboration, and shared human experience. The boy felt a sense of pride and fulfillment, knowing that the music they created together was touching lives beyond their own, spreading warmth and connection. The girl, too, felt a transformation within herself. Life on the streets had taught her to trust few people, to hide her emotions, and to fend for herself. Yet here, with the boy, she had discovered a safe space, a place where her voice mattered, where she could contribute meaningfully, and where she was valued for who she was. Each note she sang, each hum she added, was a testament to her courage, her growth, and the power of finding someone who truly listens. Days turned into weeks, and the duo's reputation grew. They were no longer just the blind boy and the homeless girl. They were a symbol of resilience and the transformative power of art. Their performances drew larger crowds, including people who had once mocked the boy. They witnessed the change in him, the confidence, the joy, and the authenticity that had emerged through music and friendship. The square became a place where people came to experience not just music, but the profound connection between two young souls who had found each other in a world that often overlooked them. Despite their growing recognition, the boy and the girl remained humble and focused on the music. They continued to play for the joy of creation, for the bond they shared, and for the hope that their music could inspire kindness in others. The coins and attention mattered little compared to the satisfaction of knowing that they were heard, understood, and appreciated for their true selves. Each performance strengthened their friendship, deepened their trust, and solidified the understanding that they were no longer alone in facing the world's challenges. The boy's family, once concerned about the ridicule he faced, began to notice the change in him. His parents saw the light in his eyes, the confidence in his hands, and the joy in his heart. They visited the square sometimes, standing quietly at the edge, witnessing the transformation that music and friendship had brought into their son's life. Their worries began to ease, replaced by pride and gratitude for the young girl who had become such an important part of their son's journey. The girl, too, experienced changes in her own life. She began to trust more, to hope more, and to believe that the world could hold moments of genuine kindness. The piano had become her anchor, the boy her companion, and together they had discovered a sense of belonging and purpose. She learned to let go of the constant fear and suspicion that had defined her life on the streets, replaced by the courage to express herself and the joy of contributing to something meaningful. One afternoon, a larger crowd gathered than ever before. People from all walks of life had come to witness the duo, drawn by word of mouth and the enchanting melodies that had spread through the town. The boy and the girl played with a depth of emotion and harmony that seemed to touch everyone present. Tears glistened in the eyes of some listeners, smiles spread across others' faces, and children clapped along, enchanted by the collaboration. The square had transformed into a space of collective emotion, a place where music bridged gaps and healed hearts. As they played, the boy and the girl felt a sense of completion, a realization that they had not only found each other, but had created a ripple of hope and connection that extended beyond themselves. Their music had become a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of empathy, and the beauty of collaboration. They had turned their struggles into art, their loneliness into friendship, and their voices into a message of understanding for all who would listen. The performance ended, not with a loud applause, but with a quiet, profound silence that lingered in the air, filled with the weight of what had been shared. Then slowly, the crowd began to clap, some cheering, others simply smiling in appreciation. The boy felt the warmth of the moment, the validation that their efforts had been worthwhile, but more importantly, he felt the bond with the girl, the shared joy of creating something meaningful together. As the sun set, casting long shadows and golden light over the square, the boy and the girl packed up, their hearts full of gratitude and satisfaction. They had found friendship, trust, and purpose through music. They had turned a place of mockery into a haven of understanding, and they had shown that even in the harshest circumstances, human connection, empathy, and shared creativity could transform lives. Walking home together, the boy felt a new sense of hope. He knew that challenges would come, that life would not always be easy, but he also knew that he was not alone. The girl's presence, their music, and the community they had built gave him strength. He could face the world with confidence, knowing that kindness and understanding existed, and that he had someone to share his journey with. The girl walked beside him, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known. The world was still uncertain, still difficult, but with the boy by her side, she felt that she could navigate it with courage and joy. Together, they had discovered the power of music, the importance of friendship, and the hope that even the smallest acts of connection could change lives. Their story, though still unfolding, had already made a mark. They had turned pain into beauty, loneliness into companionship, and ridicule into respect. They had shown that the human heart could overcome hardship, that creativity could bridge gaps, and that the simple act of listening could transform the world. And as they walked into the evening, their hearts light, their spirits connected, they knew that the music they shared would continue to guide them, to inspire others, and to remind everyone that hope, friendship, and understanding could always find a way to shine.